President Cyril Ramaphosa will, in the coming days, release his much-anticipated economic recovery plan. Government is facing intense pressure to come up with a concrete plan of action to revive the country's economy. The president says COVID-19 has hit South Africa very hard. Business for South Africa's co-chair, Martin Kingston, joins me live now via a video link here in Johannesburg. Mr. Kingston, thanks very much for your time. Let's start with your inputs to the ANC NEC Lekgotla. I know that you were not necessarily invited there, but you definitely have been part of the processing of this plan at NEDLEC.
Absolutely, Collie. Well, we have been party to those discussions. We've been discussing and engaging with not only the President, but with all of our social partners, the need for a critical economic recovery strategy as quickly as possible. And indeed, we agreed steps with our NEDLAC partners, government, labour and civil society about 3 weeks ago. That has now been placed in front of, as you say, both the ANC Lekgotla and it will be going to the Cabinet Lekgotla. We need to recognise that we have a crisis on our hands, not only in terms of economic recovery, but obviously the jobs that depend upon sustainable and inclusive growth being embarked upon as quickly as possible, exacerbated obviously by the pandemic and indeed by the lockdown that we have imposed correctly on the country over the past 6 months. In the main,
Martin, what would the business community want to see come out strongly out of that plan?
We have said that we're going to have to take some very quick and urgent decisions as a country, that we're going to have to prioritise ruthlessly. We can't have everything we want. We need to live within our means, of course, and we need to implement, and implementation is absolutely essential if we're going to be able to ensure that we can convert commitments into action. And in that context, we need to ensure that infrastructure, which is sustainable and viable, features at the centre of the proposition, that we also focus on those areas where we can scale economic activity in sectors that have not been performing appropriately, and we create a suitable policy environment to boost confidence, which of course at the moment is at all-time lows.
Yeah, and it's a point that you make that in the main infrastructure is possibly going to have to be the lead in trying to revive the economy. And we saw the president launching a massive infrastructure project at the weekend, Martin. But we can't ignore Labour, who also are parties represented at NEDLEC. There are strikes that are on the go as we speak this morning, Gautrain, and of course there is an anticipated go slow from some government employees. How is that going to hurt this plan?
That is going to fundamentally undermine this plan. The truth of the matter is that we've already seen a massive increase in those who are unemployed. We've had some level of relief through the COVID TERS program, but we need to have a productive economy, not one where industrial action is the benchmark or the hallmark of disagreement. And all it will do is further undermine what is already very fragile and low levels of both consumer and investor confidence. We need to recognise, Collie, that as a country we're competing not just within South Africa but internationally for capital, which is absolutely essential, if you like, as the fuel to power our economy. And there are other countries, other investment destinations who are certainly going to put their best foot forward in these very difficult times. So we don't support the idea of any form of industrial action. At this moment in time, we think that constructive engagement is the only way we can move forward. And indeed, we've emphasised that all social partners, in particular Labour, as well as government and business, need to put our collective shoulders to the wheel if we're going to address the very significant challenges that confront us as a country.
Yeah, and what would your message be then, in particular to federations like COSATU, who I think this morning they intend announcing that they are going to be going on strike?
Yes, well, as I've indicated, we respect their right to be able so to do, but we don't support or endorse it. We think that that's actually going to have a counterproductive impact upon the need for massive levels of economic growth and commitment of all of our resources to achieve that objective. People actually going on strike is going to not achieve that objective at all.
Martin, then there's also the wave of arrests that we saw in the past week, and lots of congratulations, if you will, towards law enforcement authorities. I just want to get reaction from the business community. What's your sense when you see what is happening on the ground?
We think it is absolutely essential. There's no doubt that the levels and perceived levels of crime and corruption, again, have undermined people's confidence not only in the state, but in the ability to lead their lives with safety, without any fear of being able to conduct themselves appropriately. And these arrests have been a long time in the coming. We hope that the Zondo Commission will actually spur further arrests. We fully agree with the sanction that Gwede Mantashe gave earlier on in your program. We think that anybody and everybody who's been involved in crime and corruption, whether it be in the public or the private sector, must be held accountable. And that there must be consequences for such action. And if and to the extent that the law enforcement agencies need to be reinforced, then that is exactly what we must do across society.
And I'm glad you make the point that corruption, whether it is in the public or in the private sector, it ought to be prosecuted and fought vigorously. I've got to ask you the question then. You have a business person who has been arrested this past week. I'm talking about Edwin Sodi here. He is said to be a business person, and it's often said that corruption happens or there is a corruptor and a corruptee. Now, some will argue that Mr. Sodi is a private business person who clearly has allegedly influenced and possibly corrupted public officials. What would your reaction be to those who say, do you see, it's exactly business people who perpetrate corruption?
Absolutely, and we think that such business people must face the full might of the law and the consequences of corrupt and criminal activities. By the way, that doesn't matter whether it's a formal or informal business, established or emerging, domestic or international business. The same holds true. We've made that absolutely clear. We cannot control the activities of such individuals. What we can do within our own ranks as organized business is ensure that those who form part and parcel of our membership are held accountable or are indeed reported to the authorities and removed from our membership.
What does this do, Martin, for the credibility of the business community? I know that Mr. Sodi may not necessarily have been a member of your association, but generally, when you see high-profile business people being hauled before the courts for allegedly having conducted themselves corruptly, what does this do for the general public and how they view those in business?
I think we need to make a very clear distinction between established business that conducts itself with probity and integrity and characters that I would characterize as tenderpreneurs who are taking advantage of and exploiting opportunities, aided and abetted often by those within the state, to be able to exploit situations. Now, I think organized business must hold itself to very high and appropriate standards, the self-same standards that it would hold the public sector to, and indeed that society would hold all of us to. Individuals, whether they be in the public or the private sector, who don't conduct themselves in accordance with those rules and norms must be prosecuted with the full might of the law and held accountable.
Martin Kingston, I must thank you very much for your time. He is the co-chair of the Business for South Africa body.